What if your marriage is just an illusion? You walk into your home expecting an ordinary evening, but instead, you're hit with a revelation that shatters your world. She looks at you with shining eyes and says, "I've decided to be a surrogate for my friend." Just like that, as casually as a trip to the store, you struggle to process what you just heard. You search for an explanation, a compromise, anything, but her decision is already made. It's a fact. You were never part of it. Now you have a choice to make. Will you stay in this marriage where you've long since stopped being considered, or is it finally time to leave? The answer is obvious, but are you ready to accept it? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. The moment I stepped through the front door, I expected nothing more than an uneventful evening. My day had been routine, predictable. There was no reason to think anything out of the ordinary was waiting for me at home. Yet, the instant I crossed the threshold, an unsettling feeling crept over me. My wife sat on the couch, her expression alight with an excitement I hadn't seen in ages. Before I could even shrug off my jacket, she hit me with a revelation that sent my mind spinning. I've decided to be a surrogate for my best friend. I'm going to carry her baby. For a brief second, I was convinced I had misheard her. My thoughts scrambled to make sense of her words. She had said it so casually, as if she were mentioning a quick trip to the grocery store. But this was no trivial matter. This was monumental. I let out a breathless chuckle, expecting her to elaborate, to tell me it was merely an idea she was considering. But she wasn't joking. Her gaze was firm, unwavering. "You're what?" I finally managed to say. "I'm doing this for her," she repeated, resolute. "She and her husband have been struggling for years. I can help, and I will. It's my body, my choice." Her certainty hit me harder than the words themselves. This wasn't a discussion, it was a pronouncement. Her decision was made. My mind flooded with questions, but only one rose to the surface. "When exactly were you planning to talk to me about this?" She rolled her eyes, as if I were being unreasonable. "I'm telling you now." "No," I shot back. "You're informing me. That's not the same as having a conversation." She let out a frustrated sigh, like she had already run through this argument in her head and deemed my reaction unnecessary. "I don't see why you're making this such a big deal," she said. "I'm doing something good, something selfless." A heavy weight settled in my chest. "You seriously don't understand how this affects both of us?" "Of course I do," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "But it's not like I'm being unfaithful. I'm simply helping a friend who can't have a child." She spoke as though this were a straightforward decision, as if it wouldn't upend everything, as if it wouldn't transform our lives. I drew in a deep breath, steadying myself. "For nearly a year, you'll be pregnant, dealing with hormones, doctor's appointments, physical changes, and I'm supposed to be fine with that? What about us? What about our life together?" She waved a dismissive hand. "It's temporary. Nothing has to change between us." I stared at her, searching for the woman I had married, the woman who used to talk through things with me before making major decisions. But the person sitting in front of me had already moved on, already settled on her path. "I should have at least been included in this decision," I said, my voice tight with restrained emotion. She shook her head, her expression tinged with exasperation. "This isn't about you." And in that moment, clarity struck me like a hammer. My thoughts, my feelings, they were irrelevant. This wasn't a partnership anymore. She had made her choice, and I was expected to simply accept it. I didn't say another word. I just stood there, letting the weight of it all sink in. The enormity of the situation pressed against me, suffocating. She had decided, and now I had a choice to make as well. I sank onto a chair, trying to collect my thoughts, but she had already moved on. She picked up her phone and started typing, likely letting her friend know everything was confirmed. I was nothing more than an afterthought in the equation. I forced myself to speak, to push back. "You can't honestly expect me to be okay with this," she sighed, setting her phone down with an impatient glance in my direction. "What do you want me to say? My mind is made up." "That's exactly the problem," I countered. "You made this decision alone. Do you really not see why that's an issue?" She crossed her arms and leaned back against the couch. "I see that you're blowing this out of proportion. It's my body. I have the right to do what I want with it. I don't need your permission." Talking to her felt like running headfirst into a wall. I wasn't trying to control her. I wasn't dictating what she could or couldn't do. I just wanted to be heard, to be part of the discussion. But every attempt I made was shut down, as if my concerns were inconsequential. "You're acting like I want to control you," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "That's not it. This is about us, about how this affects our marriage, our future." She scoffed. "It's 9 months, maybe a year with recovery. You're acting like I'm leaving you or something." I clenched my jaw, my patience wearing thin. "You're carrying a child for someone else. Do you even understand what that means?" The weight of exhaustion, both physical and emotional, settled heavily on my shoulders. Before I could say another word, she interrupted me. "I've already decided." I nearly laughed at the certainty in her voice. Had she truly considered it? Perhaps. But had she fully grasped the repercussions? The strain it would place on us? The disruption to our lives? The inevitable tension it would bring? I doubted it. "So that's it?" My voice came out quieter now, drained of its earlier intensity. "I just have to go along with it?" Her expression didn't change. "Yes." One word, unwavering and final. I let its weight sink in. She had never really intended to ask for my opinion. The choice had been made long before this conversation. My thoughts, my concerns, they were irrelevant. This wasn't just about the surrogacy anymore. It was about our marriage, about the way she made decisions, as if I were merely expected to comply. "You're not even going to consider how I feel?" I searched her face for hesitation, for the slightest sign that she might rethink things. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "I have considered it. But at the end of the day, this is my decision. I don't need your approval." And just like that, the discussion was over. She dismissed my concerns as if they were nothing more than a passing inconvenience. I sat there, realizing that something between us had already shifted, not because of the surrogacy itself, but because of what it revealed about us, about how easily she disregarded me, about how she made choices as if our marriage wasn't supposed to be a partnership. She had made her decision. And for the first time, I began to wonder if I needed to make mine. Days passed, but her words lingered. I kept waiting for her to bring it up again, to acknowledge how much this was affecting me, to show even the slightest sign of regret, not necessarily for her choice, but for the way she had made it. But she never did. To her, the matter was settled. I was simply expected to adjust. I tried. At first, I told myself I was overreacting, that given time, I'd come to terms with it. But the more I buried my emotions, the stronger they became. The distance between us grew, creeping in like a slow, inevitable tide. At first, it was subtle. Shorter conversations, a fading warmth in her voice. We weren't arguing. We just weren't us. She had made her choice, and in doing so, she had locked me out. I started noticing how much time she spent with her best friend. They had always been close, but now it was constant. The texts, the meetings, the late-night calls. She was animated when speaking to her, engaged in a way she no longer was with me. When she spoke to me, it was different, as if I were just another responsibility, something to be managed. The few times I tried to bring it up, she brushed it aside. "You're imagining things," she had said when I pointed out how distant she'd become. But I wasn't. I knew what distance felt like. It wasn't just in words or actions, it was in presence, and hers was no longer mine. Then came the appointments. She never asked me to come along. Instead, she went alone or with her best friend. I was no longer part of the process, reduced to a spectator in my own marriage. One evening, she walked through the door, her face glowing with an excitement I hadn't seen in months. "They confirmed everything," she announced, setting her bag down. "The doctors say we're ready to begin." We. The word hit harder than I expected. There was no we in this. There was her. There was her friend. And then there was me, watching from the sidelines. I tried to ask how she felt, if she had any worries, any hesitations, but she barely engaged, waving off my questions like they didn't matter. It became clear that her excitement wasn't just about the surrogacy. It was about something more, about finding a purpose outside of us. She was so wrapped up in what she was doing for her friend that she failed to see what was happening to us. The walls were closing in. The distance wasn't just emotional anymore. It was real. That night, lying in bed beside her, I understood something had shifted. This wasn't just a difficult phase. This wasn't something time or effort would mend. This was a turning point, one we wouldn't come back from. The weeks blurred into routine. Wake up, go to work, return home to a stranger. That's what she had become. Someone I barely recognized. Someone who no longer seemed to notice how much I was slipping away, or worse, didn't care. I kept telling myself to try again, to say something, to make one last attempt to reach her. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to salvage what remained. But every time I opened my mouth, I hesitated, because deep down, I already knew the truth. Then, one night, the final break happened. She came home from yet another appointment, one I hadn't even known about, tossing paperwork onto the counter as if it were nothing more than a grocery receipt. Just another task checked off her list. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. And in that moment, I understood. There was nothing left to fight for. "You didn't think it was worth mentioning you had an appointment today?" Her voice was flat as she stepped out of her shoes, barely meeting my eyes. "It was just a routine checkup, nothing significant." "That's not the point." She exhaled, long and slow, as if I were exhausting her. "Then what is? Why are you turning this into something bigger than it is?" I kept my tone steady, though the weight of the conversation pressed against my ribs. "Because it's clear that my opinion doesn't matter to you. You don't even try to pretend otherwise anymore." That made her pause. She folded her arms, finally looking at me. "I told you from the beginning. This was my decision. You act like I owe you something just because I made a choice that wasn't about you." My hands clenched at my sides. "This isn't about the choice itself, and you know it." "Then what is it about?" she shot back, daring me to explain. I took a breath, measured and slow. "It's about how little consideration you have for what this is doing to us." Her expression hardened. "I do care, but I also understand that this is necessary. I'm not going to change my mind just because it makes you uncomfortable." Her words settled between us like an immovable wall. "This isn't just discomfort," I said, my voice quieter now. "It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about the fact that a marriage is meant to be a partnership, yet somehow you're the only one making decisions." She scoffed. "So what? You expect me to just drop this because you don't like it? That's not how this works." I studied her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, just an overwhelming sense of finality. "No," I finally said. "That's not how this works, and we both know it." Something flickered in her expression, but it wasn't regret. It wasn't concern. It was irritation, like I was turning this into a bigger problem than it needed to be. And that was all. That was the moment I knew. There was nothing left worth fighting for. By the time morning arrived, my decision had already been made. I woke earlier than usual, moving quietly as I dressed. She barely stirred, oblivious. For a moment, I stood there, waiting for something. Anger, sadness, hesitation. But there was nothing, just certainty. I couldn't stay. Without another word, I stepped out the door and kept walking. Not to work, not for air, but toward the first real step of leaving. This wasn't a sudden impulse. It wasn't driven by resentment. It was the only choice left. I had spent months watching the foundation of our marriage crumble while I was the only one trying to hold it together. Last night had made it clear she had no interest in fixing anything. By the time I returned that evening, I had already spoken to a lawyer. I had set everything in motion. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up briefly before looking away. Just another night. Just another moment where I was nothing more than an afterthought. I placed my keys on the counter. "We need to talk." She barely reacted. "About what?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm leaving." That got her attention. Her brow furrowed as she finally set her phone aside. "What do you mean?" I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady. "I mean, I'm done. I can't keep doing this." Her eyes narrowed. "You're overreacting." There it was again. That dismissive tone, that refusal to acknowledge how far she had pushed me away. I shook my head. "No, I'm done." She blinked, as if only now realizing I was serious. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. I should have walked away a long time ago. She stared at me, unreadable. I expected anger, an argument, something. But she just shrugged. "So what? You're giving up on our marriage because you didn't get your way?" That was all I needed to hear. Even now, even at the very end, she still didn't understand. This was never about winning or losing. It was about respect, about trust, about the fact that we were supposed to be in this together, and we weren't. "I'm not the one who gave up," I said quietly. She didn't argue. She didn't ask me to stay. She just stood there, watching as I walked toward the door. And this time, I didn't look back. Leaving was easier than I had expected. For so long I had convinced myself that staying was my only option, that I had to keep trying. But the truth was, there was nothing left to fight for. She had made her choice, and now I had made mine. I booked a hotel room for a few nights, just enough time to figure out what came next. I didn't rush to find a new place, nor did I bury myself in distractions. Instead, I let the truth settle around me. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't waiting for some overwhelming sorrow to consume me. I just felt done. She never reached out. No calls, no messages, just silence. And in that silence, I found the answer I hadn't even needed to ask for. When the papers arrived, they only confirmed what had already become clear. There was no resistance, no hesitation, no last-minute plea to change the course we were on. Just a quiet acceptance that this was the direction we were heading. The ease of it all was almost laughable. For the longest time, I wondered if leaving would make me the villain in her version of events, if I'd be the one painted as selfish, the one who gave up. But in the end, she let me go as easily as she had shut me out. That was what hurt the most. Not the arguments, not the final exchange of words, but the way she released me without a second thought. I moved into a modest apartment, a space that, ironically, felt more like home than the house we had shared ever did. I thought I would miss her. That loneliness would cut deep. But instead, I felt something else. A lightness. The weight I had carried for so long had lifted, and in that emptiness, I finally saw the truth. I had been alone long before I ever walked away. People wanted explanations. Friends. Family. They asked what happened. I kept my response short. We wanted different things. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the full truth. Some said I should have fought harder, that relationships are built on compromise. But compromise only works when both people are willing to meet in the middle. I had spent too much time trying to hold something together while she stood by, detached. You can't salvage what someone has already let slip away. She moved forward, or maybe she had already been moving on long before I left. Either way, I didn't waste my energy thinking about her. She had made her choice, and for the first time in a long time, I made mine. I left without regret. Not because it was easy, not because it didn't hurt, but because it was necessary, and that was enough. This story has come to an end. Relationships are built on mutual respect, compromise, and the ability to truly listen to each other. When one partner makes life-altering decisions alone, disregarding the other's feelings, the relationship becomes an illusion. Love is not just about support, it's about dialogue, where both voices matter. If one person keeps giving while the other only takes, the balance crumbles, and with it, the marriage itself. A true partnership isn't about sacrifice for one, it's about walking the path together. And if you're no longer being heard, maybe it's time to walk away. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.